All right.
All right, Joey, today I'm going to respond to History Debunked. I thought it was rather interesting. And I have my own take on this topic. I will get into it later, but I also want to hear perhaps your response to this video as well.
Let's see what it is.
Hello again. It is, I think, time to look at the idea that increasing immigration in Europe, America, and Canada is part of a sinister plot by various wealthy Jews to alter the nature of the modern world. This idea appears to be widespread in some quarters, and I'm often asked in comments on this channel why I refuse to talk about it. It's not really that I refuse to talk about it, of course, rather that my time is limited and I do not wish to spend any of it talking about whether the Earth is flat or the moon landings were faked and that sort of thing.
So basically, he doesn't believe in a lot of conspiracy theories like I do. Let's continue.
However, perhaps if I discuss the idea that Jews are somehow orchestrating immigration into Europe because they wish to weaken the identity of white nations, if I do that once, then perhaps I should be spared from having to do so in the future. We begin with the observation that the Jews know as a people what it means to be refugees and asylum seekers. We remember both the life in Egypt and later the exile in Babylon and Persia, and we're talking now about 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. The verse in the Bible, I was a stranger in a strange land, has particular poignancy for the Jews. Even today, Israel is largely made up of the families of refugees and asylum seekers, those who were forced to flee from Arab countries in the late 1940s. The majority of Israelis are descended from 20th century refugees, either from Arab countries or from Europe. So if ever a people and a nation knew about being refugees and asylum seekers, I think it's fair to say that the Jews are that people.
I agree with that, and I'm gonna put my own spin on that later on. I just want to get people a little bit revved up, and I've told this story before, but his bringing this up brings an interesting kind of twist to what I have to say. Anyway,
this background, dating back to, I say, thousands of years, gives Jews a natural affinity with stateless people seeking new countries in which to live. In Britain, most Jews are Ashkenazim who fled Russia and Poland in the 18th and 19th, well, 19th really, some in the 18th, 19th and early 20th centuries. The story is much the same in America, with many of the Jews arriving there as penniless refugees. It is hardly surprising if they tend to identify now with other refugees and asylum seekers because they know how it feels. This is one strand in what we see today. The second is that the experience of racial prejudice against them, known as anti-Semitism, has also shaped them in another way. When your own group has seen a lot of prejudice, then you might reasonably be expected to sympathise with others in a similar case. This goes some way towards explaining why Jews were to be found at the forefront of the fight against segregation in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s. It was the same in South Africa. It is why the fighting arm of the African National Congress, Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, was led from its beginning in 1960, not by a black African.
now we're going to get into South Africa again with my take on this. I just wanted to kind of just stop it right there. I think for whatchamacallit purposes. I think it's a little bit better for copyright purposes. But we're going to get into that a little bit later. So let me just continue.
But rather by a Lithuanian Jew called Josel Mashal Slovo, more commonly known as Joe Slovo. Then we consider too the question of higher education. There can be no doubt that opposition to immigration in Britain, and I'm thinking now back to the 50s and 60s, and a little bit later, enthusiasm for Brexit, for getting out of Europe, were both far more common among working class people who had not attended university. Those who were keenest on welcoming immigrants and opposing moves to leave the European Union were academics, and those generally with a higher level of education. It is an undeniable fact that for whatever reason, Ashkenazi Jews in Britain do tend to be better educated and more likely to be academics than ordinary working class people. Combine this fact with what I said earlier about the historical experience of the Jews, and it is not hard to see why the struggle for social justice, as it is sometimes called, will have a disproportionate number of well-educated Jews leading it. This is not a conspiracy, the kind of thing one reads about in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. It simply follows on naturally from the three trends which I outline above. There's a good deal more that could be said on this subject, but I'm not really trying to persuade people that my view is the correct one. I'm rather explaining why I do not spend too much time broadcasting stuff about worldwide Jewish conspiracies. Another question which has been raised here is about why Israel supposedly refuses to admit refugees now. Levelled against a nation of refugees, this is a pretty weird accusation, but I think that I should really devote a separate video to this topic, since a lot of people do not appear to know about all the African and Indian refugees and asylum seekers entering Israel with the blessing of the Israeli government.
All right, Joe, do you have any comment on that video? Because I'm going to go somewhere with that.
So that last part was a little much. I'm not sure what he was saying. I don't know if it's his flowery language or what, but what can you paraphrase? What was he saying right there?
Well, I mean, basically he was giving a history to why Jews tend to be in favor of.
Oh, right. Your point here is that the Jews are responsible for this kind of spreading of kind of like communistic principles.
Well, I didn't say communistic principles. I said that they are, and he didn't say that either. Basically, what he said was Jews have been refugees.
Yes.
So they kind of have an affinity, and they're more likely to support refugees because they were themselves refugees, and they will be against racial or any kind of mistreatment of minorities because they have experience with that. So he mentioned that they were involved in the American Civil Rights Movement, and that they were very much involved in the anti-apartheid movement, and I think even he said the militant wing of the anti-apartheid movement. But I wanted to mention South Africa because South Africa should be like the woke capital of the world. And I remember, and you were there and you filmed it, when I was at the Women's March, because one of the things they would yell out was, "Refugees are welcome here." And I said, how about white South African refugees? Are they welcome in your movement? And everybody agreed with me with the exception of 3 Zionist Jews who were, I believe they were, if not in the ADL, had ADL type of support. Now, I doubt they would talk to me today. I think it's gotten even far worse, because usually the left doesn't talk to anyone who is not part of the left. And I remember asking them, do whites living in South Africa, do they deserve refugee status if it's found that they're being mistreated? And I don't remember even how the conversation went, but I feel that there was a lot of falseness there, and I feel that they were so ideologically bent on what they believed to be white supremacy and racism that just clouded their judgment that white people cannot be mistreated and be a mistreated minority. It's a very sad kind of situation today that we're seeing, and it's a very unempathetic type of thing that we're seeing, and we are seeing it in the wealthy elite, in the wealthy elites. We're seeing it a lot within the wealthy white elites, and also the wealthy elites of color as well, that I'm observing. I could be wrong on that, but that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I don't know how much of a, this is a little further than I go with these topics. I don't know. It seems a little like splitting hairs to me. I don't see it. But what I see is kind of maybe a different sort of force within the left. I don't see the racist thing as much as you're saying.
I think that leftism promotes envy, and with envy, and it evokes certain ideologies that put out unfair resentment, and it can lead to abuse. And today's left seems to defame, and they do not give any kind of, and there's no real due process for the kind of defaming that they're getting.
I wonder if this is maybe the spirit. The ADL is sort of like the spirit of Jewish ego in a way, like collectively promoting like a Jewish ethic. I'm not sure, but I see that.
I wonder though, is there a leftist Jewish ego that doesn't want to debate and doesn't want to discuss certain things? And by the way, I remember this was probably about 10 to 9 years ago. I tweeted Tim Wise, and Tim Wise, for those of you who don't know who Tim Wise is, Tim Wise is one of the first people in the quote unquote anti-racist community. And I tweeted him the situation about South Africa and white farmers, and he agreed with me. And flash forward, I think 5 or 6 years later, maybe, I don't know when, but Donald Trump said he was looking in to the issue of white South African farmers. And they went berserk, and they went automatically to shut that discussion down. And they just said it's a white supremacist talking point. And it seemed really insensitive. It seemed like a very insensitive thing to do, because these are human beings that are being murdered and being killed in some ways in very vicious and very violent ways. And the fact that this kind of thing would be shut down, and the groups that went to shut it down were the ADL and people like Tim Wise and others because of course white racists are going to latch onto that. But do they define the whole subject, or because they think it's wrong that murdering innocent people because of their race is wrong, and because they believe that murdering people of their race is wrong? Does that make not discussing it that we shouldn't discuss it at all? And then they said something to the effect, well, it was at one time like over thousands that were dying. Now it's only about 35. And I thought to myself, I read the article as I was reading it. I said, so are 35 white farmers murder, are those numbers acceptable? Are those acceptable numbers that we can't discuss this issue? Anyway, that's about all I have to say about that, Joe. And I was going to ask you at the end, is there a leftist collective Jewish ego that stops people from that shuts down debate and won't discuss?
I guess that would be up to the interpreter. I'm not religious in that way, but I do know that there is sort of it's just like AA or any kind of group. There's going to be some sort of networking and all that, and so it's a pretty big network. And I feel like sometimes there is that sort of like I don't know how else to describe it, but maybe a collective sort of ego that's promoted in media, and it shows itself in kind of strange ways: education, curriculum building, and possibly this is one of those sort of areas, but I'm not an expert in that. I just I kind of understand where you're coming from on it, though.
Well, there certainly is. People have said for like a leftist hive mind, and again, I don't know the ratio of who it is. I know that the biggest number of whites who voted against Trump, who voted for Biden, were white women. Of course, what percent of them were Jewish? And there is a question there, like what type of them are leftist, and it's not necessarily like they're trying to punish so-called people of European descent, European Gentiles, but they've had a bad experience with European Gentiles and whites, and they've had a bad experience with what they call white supremacy. So they are kind of militant on that issue. But I think to a degree, at this point, there's an ego power play, and the left tends to weaponize offense, and it's not for not for really being offended, but it's for power. And I think the right does it as well. The right also is playing the same game of weaponizing it.
So I mean, you see that it's happened in a lot of areas, but banking is probably one of those areas, and entertainment, where there's a popular thread, maybe like a social rhetoric that's being used, and you'll see the people kind of at the top of those sort of groups are going to echo the same thing over and over, and it's becomes rare, and then you have an outlier who comes around and maybe shows some dissent, And it's all kind of by play. And I think the media plays this exact thing you're saying. I think the media tends to play it to a T. It's a daily thing. She did weaponize Mr. Solution, and it was strong. The bullets hit hard.
I miss my internet father. I would love to get in touch with him again. He was very very fun. But yeah, I mean,
they do. The left is bad. It's but to say the right doesn't do it is completely naive.
Yeah, we all tend to weaponize, like, you know what, and I also had to realize for myself, like people talking about, Justin Trudeau, not apologizing, but really and truly, even when someone apologizes to you, like in a political sense, he really stuck his foot in his mouth, and he's really not doing anything to bring people together, and we're really divided under two camps here, and it's not about winning friends and influencing people. It's really about destroying your enemies. And man, we are I don't necessarily know if the civilized world can come back from this, because there is so much friction in the Western world, and there's strong dislike for on both sides, and I don't know I don't know what's going to become of that. I see how vindictive and how vicious sides can be, and it's not really a good or healthy thing. Joe, anything to say before I end this show?
Well, I think Debbie was kind of getting on to what we're going through here, and obviously issue maybe for another day, but gas prices are out of sight. Yeah, our gas prices here in California are probably about double what Debbie's saying, and it's getting crazy. It's going to get worse, and I'm telling you, if there is an energy crisis, which a lot of economists and people that are kind of keeping an eye on all these sort of things, if there's an energy crisis, things are going to get ugly really quick. But again, that's a whole different topic. Hopefully it doesn't. I know I was going to go there, but I'm going to stop myself there. Oh boy. Another topic. Thanks for all the topics, Debbie.
I mean, the mask. I mean, like I said, right now we are really missing strong leadership to bring people together, and right now we are literally just tearing each other apart, and we're not necessarily having some form of shared reality and shared agreement. It just isn't happening right now, and that's the way it is. Hey guys, I want you to like, subscribe, share this video, and if you gain anything by it, share this video if you gain anything by it. Maybe want to show it to a friend. If not, that's fine too. And also visit our Rumble page, and also visit us at Transparency and Merit. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and you also enjoy. Have a good tomorrow. Thank you.
Well, peoples.